Travis Bowman here. I'm a fingerstyle guitar player and retro video game nerd. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Cool Controllers, a YouTube series where we take some of history's craziest, coolest controllers and do a video about it. I did a video on the Dreamcast Green Goblin, which is a really cool arcade stick that's unique to the Sega Dreamcast console. And we're going to continue that theme with some Dreamcast stuff. This time we're talking about the official Sega Dreamcast fishing rod controller. Yeah, fishing games were so popular back then that you have your own controller, your own fishing rod, complete with the reel and motion controls. So this is actually a very primitive version of motion controls on the Sega Dreamcast all the way back in 1999. Which is absolutely insane to think about. Everybody likes to credit the Nintendo Wii as being the first big console to do actual motion controls, but there are examples of it far preceding that Nintendo Wii console, and this is one of those on the Sega Dreamcast. So I know what you're thinking. It's probably not that exciting. It's just for fishing games and stuff, right? Kinda, sorta, yes. There are a couple of different games that can actually utilize this gyroscope sort of motion controls that are inside of this controller, and we'll talk about those here in a little bit. Let's do a brief overview of this controller, and then we're going to talk about some games and all that good stuff too. So this controller is one of 3 documented fishing rod controllers that were released in the Sega Dreamcast lifetime. I think one of them was Mad Catz, and I don't remember the other one, to be honest. One of them is actually kind of rare and hard to find, but this is by far the most common. It really wasn't that expensive. I believe this was like a $20 or $30 controller back then in 1999. Obviously, this is meant to be used with fishing games, right? And there were a plethora of fishing games on the Sega Dreamcast, some of which were only exclusive to Japan, and then others we got over here in the States. But the controller is actually really straightforward and easy to understand. You've got the start button up top, you've got your analog stick for navigating the menus and moving your character around, and you've got the same face buttons that you would on any old regular Sega Dreamcast controller, A, B, X, and Y. We've got this lever right here that's designed to, of course, reel in the fish once you catch it, but the idea with this, and what makes it so crazy and unique, in my opinion, you don't just press a button to throw out your line. You can if you want, but what's really cool about this is that you can flick that controller, and that's how you throw up and cast out your line into the water, which is really, really cool. And once you do it, it's like, wow, this is actually a really cool thing, especially back then, man. I know it might not seem as cool today, but back then, having something like this is like amazing. You know, it's so cool to see your character do that same motion that you just did to cast that line out to start catching some fish, man. It's a really, really cool controller. And, you know, quite frankly, I miss stuff like this. We don't have cool niche peripherals like this anymore. It's just arcade sticks and controllers, and that's it. We don't have any of the weird stuff like we used to back in the day. One other thing that I would like to mention about this controller is that it's got this little lip right here on the bottom, so you can comfortably stick your finger right there. It's a really kind of robust design. It is not a piece of crap like some other controllers might be. But I haven't tested out the Mad Catz controller, but I hear that it's kind of paling in comparison compared to this one, the official one that was actually made by ASCII and Sega together, which is really, really cool. I've never had any issues with this controller whatsoever. I mean, I only use it for fishing games, except for a couple of weird stuff that we can look at here in a little bit. But, you know, this is really, really well designed. It's a pretty large controller, so I feel like anybody could really get the hang of this pretty quickly. It's got a decently long cable as well, and I just really think this is one of the coolest things about Sega as a hardware manufacturer, because they used to do some really off-the-wall stuff like that, man, and I feel like that's really kind of a lost art form, is taking chances and doing weird things with hardware, and I just love Sega so much for that. Now, one thing that seems to be missing from this controller is, of course, a slot for your Dreamcast VMU, your visual memory unit, to save your game. So unfortunately, you can't save your game through this controller, but, you know, that's kind of a thing to be expected, you know, because where the hell are you going to put it? There's not a lot of room to put that in there, and you're kind of sacrificing that save function with this controller with being able to have that rumble feature as well as those gyroscope motion sensors that are going on in there. So you definitely don't want to be flicking this thing with a bunch of extra weight too, because it could fly out of your hands and hit the TV, and that's a bad, bad situation. So I don't have every single fishing game for the Sega Dreamcast because, like I said, there's actually quite a few, more than you might imagine. But the 2 main ones that I have here are, of course, Sega Marine Fishing and the Big Daddy, Sega Bass Fishing. Apparently Sega Bass Fishing 2 is kind of a desirable game for the Dreamcast for some reason. I'm not sure why. But go-to game for this is definitely Sega Bass Fishing. There's an arcade mode, which makes sense because this is kind of an arcade game. You've got an arcade mode and an original mode, and you even got like a career mode in there too. So there's a lot of stuff in this game. It's not just, I'm gonna go fishing now. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that you can do with that as well. This is a surprisingly fun party game. What I mean is that if you've got friends over at your house, you can hook up the Dreamcast, plug in the fishing rod controller and pass it around and see who can get the biggest fish. It's actually a lot of fun, man. I actually did that with a couple of my buddies recently. Check out this footage, that's exactly what we're doing right here. And it was a really, really fun time, and I can't wait to do this again with some more of my friends because, I mean, what a great party game. You know, I'm not super deep into like Mario Kart and stuff like that. I would rather do the weird stuff like this. So now let's talk about some of the weird games that technically work with this controller right here. And the first one has to be Soul Calibur. A fighting game, a 3D fighting game on the Sega Dreamcast. Why the hell would you want to use a fishing rod controller with a fighting game on the Sega Dreamcast? And the only answer is quite simple. Just as a novelty, just because you can. You know, nobody would actually try to play through this game with the fishing rod controller, but it totally works. You can use all the face buttons just like you could normally. I don't know how you would do that. I mean, you would have to move the stick with your left hand, right? And then maybe try to, you know, spider hand or claw hand to get the other buttons and stuff like that. But that's not why you would want to use this. The gimmick is that the motion controls activate somewhat of a random button set in this controller, so that way if you just keep flicking the controller in different directions, your character will end up doing something. But by no way is it actually a functional thing that you could probably beat the game with, unless you put it on the easiest difficulty, of course. But it's just a novelty, man. It's just a weird thing. Obviously this was not designed to be used with a game like this. This is just for fishing games and stuff like that. But still, it's a pretty cool function, and it's fun to try out, especially if you got friends over. You might hook up a controller on Soul Calibur and then hook this up in Player 2 and see if the fishing guy can beat the actual original controller guy, just for fun. Now, the other game that is confirmed to be a working thing with this controller is a really strange one. It's Virtua Tennis on the Sega Dreamcast. One of my favorite games of all time that I've covered countless times on my YouTube channel because I love it so much. It's such a great arcade game. But this functionality of swooshing this fishing rod controller back and forth actually kind of makes sense with the tennis game. And there's only two buttons that you have to worry about in a game like that, and that's just your standard, you know, hit the ball shot, and then you have what's called a lob shot, where you hit it way up in the sky so it tries to go over your opponent's head. So unfortunately it's kind of difficult to determine which one is going to be used, but it's still really fun to mess around with because it feels really strange. Like I said, this is like a primitive version of motion controls. Like, you can actually, you know, hit this ball back and forth and the person on the screen is hitting it. It's a really strange sensation. By no means a proper way to play Virtua Tennis if you actually want to get good at the game and do well in it, but still, it's super cool. It's super cool that it even works, you know. And, you know, you think of the Wii, which was 2006, this was 1999 that we were able to do stuff like this, which really, honestly, for being real with each other, kind of makes me sad because I miss Sega so much. And I miss the weird part of Sega. You know, Nintendo seems to always kind of play it safe with their IPs and everything that they do as far as the games and stuff like that. But I feel like Sega was always that crazy uncle that just went out and did whatever the hell he felt like. And he was a fun guy. He had a lot of fun. And you admire him for that. He's a guy that takes chances. And I feel like because Sega's gone, we have the PlayStation and the Xbox and Nintendo over here in the corner doing their own thing. I feel like that's very sorely missed in the video game community these days. And that's why I like to make these videos, to go back and relive some of these cool things that we used to have when this console was still relevant. So you can see it kind of sort of works, you know. It's really not that bad. It's kind of a fun experience, you know. It's a good way to get up and moving if you want to play your Sega Dreamcast, I guess. But all in seriousness, it's just a really cool novelty, and it's such a wonderful thing to be able to say, yeah, I've got a fishing game, like a legitimate fishing game that's not, you know, a standard controller. It's an actual fishing rod controller. And a lot of people really think it's a lot of fun and really cool. So now the only thing left to do in this video is to rate this controller based on how crazy it is, how cool it is, and how it functions as a controller. The crazy factor is pretty up there, in my opinion, for this one, man. And, you know, there have been fishing rod controllers in the past for the original PlayStation, I believe, but I don't know, there's just something about this one. I think because of the integration of the gyroscope motion control stuff that we've got going on in there, this one is really special. And you know, I love the design of it too. It's got that Dreamcast white with the gray buttons and stuff like that. I feel like they could have spiced it up just a little bit and have the buttons be the same color scheme as the original Dreamcast controller, but that's just a nitpick, to be honest. As far as crazy is concerned, to have a fishing rod controller isn't that crazy, but to have one with these primitive motion controls at this period of time in gaming history, that's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy, and especially coming from Sega at this particular time in their lifespan. So I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10 as far as being crazy. I think that's a pretty fair rating. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I feel like that's a pretty fair rating for as far as how crazy this controller actually is. Now we gotta rate it based on how cool it is. Well, I mean, I think it's pretty cool, but I'm biased as hell, dude. I've got so many Dreamcast videos because it's my favorite console of all time. So that's why the rating system is so difficult for me. But I still want to try to do it anyway. I think it's pretty darn cool. Compared to the Dreamcast Green Goblin, maybe not as cool, but it's still pretty darn cool. But you know, at the end of the day, it's a fishing rod. You know, how cool is fishing? A lot of people like to fish, so I imagine it's pretty popular. But honestly, for what it is, I really think it's a really cool addition to the library of hardware that the Sega Dreamcast got. A lot of people just don't understand or have any idea how many really cool pieces of peripherals and hardware that we got for that system over the short lifespan that it was around. But I gotta say, this is probably a 5 out of 10. I would give it a 5 out of 10. It's cool, but it's not like anything super special. I mean, it's special that we got it, but it's a fishing rod controller, dude. You know what I mean? Now we need to rate it based on how it functions as a controller. And I've got to give it a 10 out of 10, man. It does its job. It's a fishing rod controller. I mean, even without the motion controls, you could just press the A button to cast your line out and then reel that sucker in, and everything would be fine. But they gave us that flicking ability to flick that sucker, something that they most certainly did not have to do. So in my book, I'm gonna rate it high on functionality as a controller. It's a 10 out of 10. It's very likely the best fishing rod controller that we will ever have, ever, in my opinion. And I'd love to know what you guys think about that rating, and I'd love to know how you would feel about rating this Sega Dreamcast controller in particular. How crazy do you think this is? How cool is it? And in your experience, how well does it function as a controller? I've never had an issue where this controller just doesn't work for whatever reason. I mean, it's built like a tank. It's kind of heavy too. I bet you if I clock somebody in the forehead with it, it'd knock them out pretty quickly. It might damage the controller, to be honest, but this is heavy duty plastic, man. Not like the newer third-party controllers that we get today. This one is some hardcore heavy plastic for sure. I feel like every time I do a video about some controller, I have to talk about whether or not it would hurt somebody if you threw it at them. That's a theme that I'd gladly keep going. I think that's a pretty good judge of quality on a controller. Would it hurt somebody if you hit somebody with it, or would it break upon impact on their flesh and their skull? That's a really interesting point. I'm gonna keep doing that. It's nice. Well, I really appreciate you guys checking out this series. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below, have you ever used a fishing rod controller before? And have you ever used the Sega Dreamcast official fishing rod controller? Let me know the answers to all those questions in the comment section below. Thanks for checking out the other videos in this series, and thank you for subscribing. I'll catch you guys at the very next video. Thanks very much. Bye-bye. Ha! Yeah!